This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Ian Dale at Drive.
Hello, very good afternoon. It's 4:04 here on LBC. You're listening to Ian Dale at Drive. Lots of people are committing news today. Theresa May is in Brussels having a face-to-face meeting with Donald Tusk, maybe right at this moment. We'll get the latest on that. There's a political crisis in Ireland, and LBC has found 150 children are being housed in a modern-day slum. We'll have more on that later this hour. And after 5, we're going to be talking about the terrible terror attack in Egypt. Now, a government review of cycle safety will consider submissions calling for helmets to be made compulsory, but the Department of Transport has played down the likelihood of the idea becoming a reality. Jesse Norman, the Minister for Roads and Local Transport, said he would consider making helmets mandatory if groups or individuals made submissions calling for as much to the government cycle safety review. The Brain Injury Association, Headway, said it would submit information to the review in support of enforced wearing of helmets. Now, I think this is quite a difficult one because I don't like new government diktats telling us we all have to do things. And I was against the introduction of seatbelts back in the early 1980s. I've changed my view on that, though, particularly after I had a head-on crash at 80 miles an hour. I hit a transit van with my two sisters in the car on my 20th birthday. None of us were wearing seatbelts, and all three of us were very lucky to escape from that accident with our lives intact. I wonder whether you think that this would be a good thing to do. It would, I suppose, if you believe that helmets actually do protect the brain in the circumstances of a crash, that it would be a good thing to make them mandatory. But on the other hand, it might well mean a lot of people just don't cycle anymore because the bother of carrying around the helmets to sort of to and from work may just be too much for some people. Now, you might think, well, that's a minor inconvenience if it saves your life. But, I would be a good case in point here. And I don't do an awful lot of cycling, but I do sometimes use, I was going to say Boris bike, but they're now called Sadiq cycles, aren't they? To go from my office on Albert Embankment to Leicester Square. I do cycle sometimes. Would I cycle if I had to wear a helmet? Answer, probably not. Well, let's talk to Beverly Turner, of course, LBC presenter. You can listen to her every Saturday evening from 6. She's got a very direct interest in this, and I'll let her explain it to you. Hi, Beverly.
Hi, Ian. That's right. My direct interest, obviously, I'm married to James Cracknell, the double Olympic gold medalist rower, and in 2010 he was hit from behind by a petrol truck, a fuel truck in the States, and the wing mirror hit the back of his head. He was on a bike and he had a helmet on, and the helmet saved his life. It's no exaggeration to say that if he hadn't been wearing that helmet, he would be dead today. And a bit like you with your car crash, it's the kind of issue that is not particularly important to you until you find yourself in a neurological ward and you suddenly have a renewed appreciation for bike helmets and how valuable and how important they can be if the worst actually happens. In terms of this legislation, I personally, my particular view is that I think it should be mandatory for under 16s. I think if people want to go out as adults and cycle without a helmet, then I think that should be personal choice. If you are stupid enough, Ian, to go cycling without a helmet and run the risk of smashing your brains out on the pavement, then I think so be it. I don't think we should necessarily be discouraging adults from cycling by enforcing helmet use. But I think the wheel change.
You could make an argument to say, well, people who don't wear cycle helmets, like I do not on the occasions when I do cycle, if we have an accident, we're more likely then to have to be admitted to hospital and have expensive treatment on the NHS. So we're therefore a burden on the NHS. Whereas if we had worn a cycle, there's no cycle helmet, there are no guarantees that would prevent a serious injury, but the chances of probability, it probably would.
I guess it's also that if you're not wearing a helmet, you're more likely to die. And then you won't be a burden on the NHS, but it will be quite a heavy bereavement for your family and all your loved ones to bear. So I would look at it probably from that point of view, having stood by the bedside of James in intensive care and thanking the heavens that he was wearing that bike helmet that day, because he's made a full recovery 7.5 years after.
But it took a long time, though, didn't it?
Oh, yeah, it absolutely took a long time. But I think this is a more preferable scenario than him actually not having survived the incident. And the interesting thing is the majority of brain injuries which are sustained by children on bicycles. Don't involve other vehicles. I think one of the myths is that, well, you know, we're only in the park, we're only on the pavement, we're going to be safe without a helmet. Actually, it can just take an upturned curb or, you know, a slightly loose pavement slab, and then that child's life and that family's life is changed forever. The brain injuries are significantly impacting on all families. If you have a person, even a fairly minor brain injury, to be honest, James's was very severe, and his recovery has confounded everybody who expected him not to recover in the way that he has. But even a minor brain injury can have huge impact for the rest of your life. And it's such a simple thing to just put on a bike helmet and to take one, and it can be life-changing.
Bev, thanks very much. That's Beverly Turner. You can listen to her tomorrow evening from 6 o'clock here on LBC. Duncan Dollymore joins me, Cycling UK's Head of Advocacy and Campaigns. Duncan, thank you for coming on the programme. I imagine you'd probably echo virtually everything that Bev said there, but let me just read you out a text I've had from Steve, who says, cycle helmets have been tested and are not fit for their intended purpose. In an accident, the polyfoam helmet offers no cerebral protection from impact. Pick one up, push your extended finger straight through it. They are a con, in my opinion. What do you say to Steve, Duncan?
I wouldn't go completely as far as he does. However, he is right that they're designed for a minor impact. They're designed for less than 12 mile per hour collision. They're not designed to deal with a situation where you're in a collision with a lorry or you're run over by a car. They're designed for low impact, and it's a piece of polystyrene. And to that extent, sometimes the benefits that may accrue are overstated in relation to matters. On the broader point, Ian, you mentioned that you thought I'd probably agree with Beverly. I don't agree with Beverly in relation to the things that she said. Our position is very much it's a personal choice issue. We're not anti-helmet, we're not pro-helmet. We simply say that people should have the position to make the choice themselves. It's very difficult to argue with somebody like Beverly who has a personal experience, as she does, in relation to it. But we look at it in terms of the broader public health issue, and we know that wherever a country or a state or a city has introduced compulsory helmet laws around the world, there's been a massive reduction in the number of people cycling. You indicated that you might not do it if you had to wear a helmet. 40% reduction in most of the places in New Zealand and Australia that did it, and a 90% reduction in teenage girls riding bikes in Sydney when they did it. So there's huge drop-off, which has huge and enormous public health benefits when we're trying to deal with other public health issues in society generally. So on that basis, we don't look at it on the individual basis, so what if this person had been wearing a helmet on this particular day? We look at it on the broader public health issue, and this has severe downsides if you push it through in the way that has been suggested.
Would you have, in the early 1980s, been against the introduction of seatbelts for the same reason, that it should be down to individuals to decide?
No, I've been asked this before. I think there is a difference in...
I thought it was being original.
Yeah, I think there is... Yeah, it is original, but there is a slight difference in relation to that, because you don't have in that situation the health disbenefits of that legislation. When that legislation was passed in the early 80s, and a number of MPs worked really hard to make sure that was passed, there wasn't the argument that if you force this will have a public health disbenefit in relation to deterring forms of active travel. That's the biggest argument in relation to the helmet issue. I've avoided the very nuanced arguments about the benefits of helmets because, to be honest, there are academics and experts that go around in circles about what the medical benefits are. We take the view, whatever the medical benefits of a helmet in a particular scenario are concerned, the actual public health disbenefits of compulsory helmet laws completely outweigh any benefit that you might get.
And just finally, I imagine there are different types of helmet, different prices. I mean, people who take part in the in cycling races, for example, presumably they'd be paying hundreds, if not thousands of pounds for those, because they must be more robust than the kind of helmets that Steve was talking about.
Not necessarily, actually. You are right about the price, but not necessarily about the safety standard, because they're designed for lightweight, for aerodynamic features, and for comfort in terms of not being too hot when you're riding, etc. So they don't necessarily provide a higher safety standard in relation to matters.
Great to talk to you, Duncan. Thank you. That's Duncan Dollymore, Cycling UK's Head of Advocacy and Campaigns. Paul in Oxford says, look at how many people have been saved by the nanny state, in quotes, introducing smoking bans in public places. I was originally against the ban, but now I think it's persuaded more people to give up smoking than countless advertising campaigns. People are inherently lazy and sometimes need the law to give them a nudge to do something that will save their lives. Lots of you phoning in, lots of you texting and tweeting as well. We'll come to more of your calls in... Well, I haven't had a call yet, have we? We'll come to your calls in just a moment. 0345 6060 973. That's the number you need if you want to text me, 84850, and you can tweet me at Ian Dale, IAINDALE, or at LBC. You're listening to LBC. It's 4:15.
Leading Britain's conversation with Ian Dale at Drive on LBC.
90 minutes past 4 here on LBC. We're talking about the issue of cycling helmets, whether they should be mandatory or not. I can see both sides of the argument here. And if you forced me to say what I thought, I think I'd probably go down on the side of that they shouldn't be compulsory for the reasons that, or many of the reasons that Duncan Dollymore just outlined. But I do have a slightly open mind on this, which is unusual for me, as you will know. 0345 6060 973. What do other countries do? What do other cities do? What about the major cycling cities? We all think of Amsterdam being the biggest one, I suppose, but there are lots of cities around the world where there are lots of cyclists. Do other countries have mandatory cycling helmets? We heard there about Sydney, where the usage of bicycles has gone down dramatically after they introduced compulsory helmets. And what about if you work for the medical services? I mean, I guess that's not really an argument there, is it? Is there? If you work for somebody, if you work in a hospital and you've seen the results of bike crashes where someone hasn't worn a helmet, I guess I know what you're going to say. Let's go to Ashley in Lewisham. Hello, Ashley.
Hello, how are you?
I'm all right, thank you. What would you like to say?
I have to say, I completely agree that having a cycle helmet is, having it to be compulsory would be highly beneficial for cyclists. I can also see the argument that people say, you know, I'd have to carry this cycle helmet around with me to and from work, etc. But if you are an avid and keen cyclist, carrying that helmet shouldn't be of any discourse to you while you're actually cycling, whether it be to work or to visit friends or family, or even on your journey home. Having that is an extra safety precaution, much the same as having lights on your bike. Well,
we get your point, actually. The line's really, really bad there. I would say, though, unless if you work in the city and you carry a briefcase to work, where are you going to put your cycling helmet? Somebody has texted me to say, well, you can get blow-up cycling helmets. Really? Do they... My producer's nodding. Do they really work? I mean, what protection are you going to get from a blow-up cycling helmet? Maybe someone can explain that to me. Bill is in Watford. Hi, Bill.
Oh, hi. After spending a lifetime in the ambulance service, I would say it should be definitely mandatory to wear a cycle helmet. And the actual question of carrying a helmet, what about motorcyclists? That they have to do the same. And if you have seen people with head injuries following cycling accidents, you would certainly be persuaded that it should be mandatory.
I think you're absolutely right on that, and I think if you come from your background, having worked for the ambulance service, I can completely understand. You see, I'm now flipping back onto your side of the argument. I'm feeling like a Liberal Democrat here, sort of going from one extreme to the other. Thank you, Bill. Jonathan is in Bishop Stortford. Hello, Jonathan.
Oh, yes, good evening, Ian. Yes, it's most essential that these cyclists understand this is for their safety. And why is it that cyclists don't want to pay tax and insurance for road usage? Why don't they want to wear helmets? Because it's safe. Why are numbers going to decrease when they're asked to wear a helmet? You don't hear motorcyclists saying, oh, well, I'm not going to get my motorcycle out anymore because I'm asked to wear a helmet for my safety. So it seems to be that cyclists have this really sort of superior attitude in life that, oh, don't tell us what to do. But I'm afraid we've got busy roads, like they have to pay tax and insurance, not because we're being nasty, it's because everybody else has to do that, and it's about road usage. So they just seem to be exempt from anything, Ian. And if I say one more thing, the gentleman that came on from the cyclists of London, says that you can put your hand through the current helmet. We should make a helmet that is more suitable for process and more like a motorcycle helmet. And these people should be enforced to use it. And if they don't, it's down to their own safety. Look at James Cracknell. He would not be alive now.
No, he wouldn't, but I'm never sure whether using one person's example is enough evidence to say you should make something compulsory.
Yes, but these cyclists seem to be elite on every single issue. LBC talk about this, as they should do, on a regular basis, but absolutely nothing changes. I mean, we've had somebody we've had a person killed and a cyclist in prison now because of this, because he decided to change his bike for usage. They seem to have this elitist attitude, and I'm told when I come on to the radio talk about this that I'm a cyclist hater. I'm not. I just want them to conform like anyone else, and they don't ever want to do that.
Well, the problem is, and I think you do have a point here, that sometimes cyclists are their own worst advocates. I had to drive in today. I'd normally come by train, but I drove in today. And on the Old Kent Road, I was on sort of the left-hand lane, and I suddenly saw this cyclist behind me sort of gesticulating to me, saying, well, why are you so near the curb? Why aren't you letting me go through on the left? And I'm thinking, sorry, mate, that's not the highway code, and stop sticking your finger up at me. And I was quite proud of myself that I restrained myself and didn't get involved in road rage, because believe me, I wanted to.
Ian, and they need to understand that we are now, in many cases, certainly on country lanes, actually moving now, having paid all this money for our fuel and everything else, which makes them very angry, but also makes us even more angry, because now we're doing their speed. But they have no idea of this at all. They think they should not pay anything at all. They shouldn't be safe. They shouldn't abide the laws of the road. It's absolutely appalling.
Well, I don't agree with you on that. I don't think that we should have some ridiculously complicated administrative scheme where we have to have, like, number plates for bikes, for goodness sake. We actually want to encourage more people onto bikes. That would be a good thing to do. So I don't agree with you that there should be some sort of licensing scheme for bikes, because I can't see how it would work or even be enforced. Insurance, well, we can have a debate about that, but we're not going to do that today because I wanted to stick to cycle helmets. Jonathan, thank you. Let's go to Alex in Pimlico. Alex, your point, please.
Afternoon, Ian. A very quick one for you. It's very simple. I'm not a cyclist. I've just come back from Europe, and in fact, a few places in Amsterdam. No one wears cycling helmets out there. Kids, adults, no one. It's a big rarity to see people. And the thing is, we know what James Cracknell's been through. We've heard that, and that's very unfortunate. It should be everyone's personal choice, and make that choice good or bad. And God will deal the cards. It's down to you. Government must stop interfering. It's got enough on its hands.
Well, that's definitely a point of view, Alex, one I share on most things. Interestingly, I'm looking at my board here. It's very few cyclists are phoning in. It's all people wanting to pontificate about what cyclists should do. Now, nothing wrong with that, but I would like to hear the cyclist point of view as well. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. Louise is in Camberley. Louise, what would you like to say?
Hi, so I've got family in Holland, and we go over there quite a lot to stay for a while, and when we're over there, we only use bikes to get around, and it's not compulsory to use helmets over there, but because of the system that they have, the bicycle has right of way over, like, everything, including pedestrians, and they have such a good system in that way, and I think it's extremely difficult to implicate it in England because everyone's so used to what we have now, but because they don't have helmets over there, and the system that they have a much lower rate of accidents anyway.
And is that because there's little interaction between cyclists and cars? Because London is built the way it is, the roads are quite narrow, and even on the cycle lanes there is still some interaction with cars. Whereas, I haven't been to Amsterdam for donkey's years, but my recollection there is that there are very few points where cars and bikes come into contact with each other.
Well, no, because they do share the same road still, but it's just because the cars are so aware of cyclists, because it's everything is so pro-cycle. I mean, Holland, first of all, is flat anyway, so cycling is just it's so easy. You've got less reason not to do it anyway. So that's another thing that you wouldn't have in England. But you just have less accidents anyway because the cars are just so aware of it. And if it was to happen in England, it would be a very long process of drivers getting used to it. But again, it's the same as the seatbelts because, you know, it's happened now. And I've learned to drive like that, and I wouldn't get in a car without putting one on anyway. So it's the same kind of thing. And, you know, they said about in Sydney that the girls not wearing helmets rose by 90% or something.
Well, the bicycle usage dropped by 90% among young girls when they introduced mandatory helmets.
Yeah, so, I mean, that happened when I was in school. My mum used to try and get me to cycle to school, and I refused to because she tried to get me to wear a helmet. And even though I went to a girls' school, I was still really conscious about my hair. So that is like a massive factor.
Try being 55 and bald, then you'd be conscious about it. Louise, really interesting call. Thank you very much. Michael is in Southwark. Hello, Michael.
I'm in between because I do ride a lot, and I think it should be because it's safer. But on the other hand, I don't think it'll make any difference to deaths on the road. Because if car drivers are still going to persist on behaving the way they do, and cyclists are going to persist on behaving the way they do, it's going to make no difference.
Well, that's a very interesting point, Michael, because Jace has tweeted something similar. He says, I'm Dutch and I live in London. Back in Holland, pedestrians, cyclists and drivers all respect each other and also adhere to the traffic rules. But in London, it's quite the opposite. So much aggression on the roads. We all need to take a chill pill.
Yeah, and that's the way it is, because I always say it doesn't happen on the motorways, but yet there's still accidents, and I wonder who's driving on those, eh?
Wow.
All by themselves, eh? Think about that.
OK, Michael, thank you very much. As I drive out of London along the embankment this evening, I know I shall feel aggression when I see those hugely expensive cycle lanes with nobody using them. Hundreds of millions of pounds spent for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Anyway, that's a favourite hobby horse of mine. I know Ian Collins agrees with me. I listened to him talking about that the other night as well. More of your calls to come. We're also going to be talking about a really important story because LBC has found 150 children are being housed in a modern-day slum. So that's coming up in a moment. It's 4:30. Let's get the latest news headlines on LBC from Moira Alderson.
Ian Dale at Drive on LBC.
It's 2525. We'll come back to your calls on cycling in a moment. But first of all, LBC has learned that 150 children are living on a working industrial estate in South London. 4 London councils have placed families in a converted office building, which has been called a modern-day slum. One resident says the location is so remote an ambulance was unable to get to her while she was in labour, forcing her to give birth in a car park. This resident spoke to LBC reporter Lucy Huff, and she joins me now. Lucy, take us through what happened.
Well, Ian, Angeli Facey is a young woman who lived until very recently in Connect House, which is right in the middle of this working industrial estate in South London. And in March of this year, she went into labour and called emergency services around 8 p.m. But because of where the building is located, she says it took the ambulance an hour to find her. Here's her story, but a warning that the details are a little bit graphic.
Well, when I phoned them and they said to me, "Are you in labour?" and I said yes, and they said to me, just to push, every contraction you feel, push. I said, okay then. They said, don't delay the labour because we're going to be there soon. Little did I know that I'm going to be pushing out the rest of it outside of the car park. You know, when I got outside of the Connect House, it was so cold. It was so really cold. You know, I had to sort of walk up and down, waiting for the ambulance. I kept on phoning them and saying, where are you? They kept on saying they were across the road, they were in the bread factory. I had to sort of make myself known by walking out, and the walk that I did just brought the whole sort of baby down.
And you must have been in agony.
Yeah, it was killing me. You know, blood was everywhere. You know, I was screaming. It was the worstest point of my life. I don't think any human being should go through that.
And what happened to your baby after that?
I think after 40 days, in between that, he picked up a tummy infection. That's what I've been told and stuff. And after 40 days, he died. I feel empty. I feel lost. Even though I'm glad to move out the Willow Lane, it's like piece of me's gone with it.
So a truly shocking account from Anjali there, a young woman forced to give birth in a car park because the ambulance couldn't find her. And since this happened, Anjali's been moved to other temporary accommodation and out of Connect House, but there's still 84 families living in the building. And other residents I spoke to have similar stories. One woman called emergency services when a fire broke out a couple of weeks ago, and again they said they were struggling to find the building on their GPS system. Now, I did speak to the letting agent who said the building was fully compliant with all the relevant regulations, but Anjali's story is a clear example of the substandard conditions these families are living in.
Shocking. Lucy, thank you very much indeed. That's Lucy Huff, LBC reporter. Now, it's 4:38. Let's go back to our subject of cycling helmets. Should they be made compulsory? Some very divergent views here, and I can understand both sides of the argument. I think some really valid points being made on both sides. Let's go to Paul, who's in Chesham. Hello, Paul.
Hi there, Ian.
Hi, what would you like to say?
Well, A, I'm a cyclist. B, I used to sit on the governing body of a sport, triathlon, that uses cycling. And I would say probably I've been knocked off into a 5-bar gate. I've come off standing still across a bike without a helmet and knocked myself out on my own doorstep. And I've been knocked off a bike whilst racing, and each time a helmet has taken the impact. And I probably wouldn't be here if I hadn't been wearing a helmet. I completely get the ethos of not wearing a helmet and being free, but it's a bit of an asymmetric world at the moment. You know, if you're going to come up against a car, you'll always come off second best. And just one small point on that asymmetric relationship, I think you'll find that most car drivers don't ride a bike, whereas nearly every single bike cyclist rides a car. So I think the amount of knowledge in that relationship is a bit skewed. I think if you got every council official and every car driver to ride a bike, they'd understand about why they need to lead a bit of a bigger gap. Having said that, you've got two sorts of cyclists in this country. You've got the pro guy, the mammal who gets in all the gear with the right stuff, who thinks probably they're a cut above the rest. And then you've got the other ones that may commute in or have more fun on it. And they're probably the ones in London that are more at risk. So it's a really complicated issue, but I would come down firmly at being a recipient of still being alive, together with a couple of other people who are still alive because of helmets. So, yes, you should wear one, I think.
I find on this I'm a complete hypocrite, because when I'm behind the wheel of a car, I adopt the persona of a typical car driver, and sort of the cyclists are in my way, and please get out of my way. Whereas if I'm on a bike, of course, I think completely different, and never the twain shall meet.
No, I'm completely with you. I mean, I'm a member of a couple of cycling clubs, and sometimes it makes my heart weak when you see cyclists 3 or 4 abreast, or just not using common sense and then quoting the rules of the road to kind of qualify why they're riding like they are. As I said, I think if both parties had just a bit more give and take, you would probably find the whole place a safer situation. But at the end of the day, as it is in India, right is, or might is right. You know, the bigger vehicle is always right. And if you cycle defensively, which can get you through things pretty quickly, you'll be a lot safer. So I just think, I mean, how many other kind of sports would you allow someone out on a bike that's perhaps capable of doing 30 miles an hour with very poor brakes, very poor perception? You've just got to take these precautions.
Well, I suppose we could look at boxing as an example here now, where you have to wear protective headgear when you're boxing, whereas that wasn't the case not that long ago. And you wouldn't think of letting anybody in a boxing ring without protective headgear now, would you? Paul, thank you. Ross is in Bookham in Surrey. Hello, Ross.
Hi there, Ian.
Hi.
Hi. I'm a cyclist. I've had a reasonably bad accident at some point, and the helmet was left split in a few pieces, and I was absolutely fine. I had nothing but a black eye. I class myself as a reasonably competent cyclist as well. But things happen, accidents happen. I understand the point that you gave on if it becomes compulsory, what are people like businessmen going to do walking around the city and they're trying to use a Santander bike? But why don't the bikes have a helmet with them? And then that becomes part of it. You just have to wear these helmets.
And you could actually do that, couldn't you? You could fit a little sort of compartment on the side of the back wheel, I'd guess.
Yeah, and when the bike unlocks, something unlocks in the helmet.
Yeah.
I'm not a designer, but, I'm sure that there's something that can be done. And I think it's one of the excuses for not wearing them, really.
Ross, we're going to leave it there again because the line's really... I don't know what's happening with... maybe the atmospherics are bad today, but some terrible phone lines we're getting. Let's go to Phil in Luton. Hello, Phil.
Hi, I'm actually in Manchester now.
Has it taken... You got there quickly since your first phone. What would you like to say?
There's two things, really. Haven't we been here before with motorcyclists? Many, many years ago, I remember you didn't have to wear a helmet to ride on the road. And now you have to wear a helmet to ride on the road. And I know the speeds are different, but round town, they're the same as a cyclist. So if I as a motorcyclist fall off my motorbike around town, am I not as likely to damage my head as a cyclist? But I have to wear a helmet. Yeah, no, there is a certain logic to that. I'll give you that. Yeah, and my second point is my partner is an avid cyclist. I've had her on the back of the motorbike a couple of times. One of the times she told me off quite brutally, really, because I went over the speed limit. I went over the speed limit by 10 miles an hour in a 30. Not for very long, and I dropped back down, and then she told me off. And then about 2 weeks later, she came home telling me how she'd done 42 miles an hour down a hill wearing her protective lycra. There you go. So cyclists, they're not... What I'm trying to say is they're not bulletproof. They will take injury. And as a responsible cyclist, surely you should be doing everything you can to protect yourself from injury. And I would even go as far as to say there should be knee pads and elbow pads and shoulder pads into lycra garments now. Most cyclists have them in jackets. They're not exactly heavy. They're not hot. Look at the BMX cyclists who race. Yeah, you couldn't regulate that though, could you? I mean, you're not going to persuade somebody who's cycling to work to put. Well, first of all, put lycra on in the first place, and if you did have lycra on, put knee pads in. No, that really is one step too far. Phil, thank you. Karen in Southport texts me to say, my 28-year-old son asked me why I didn't wear a helmet. I replied that I liked the wind in my hair. He replied, would you like the curbstone in your hair? Promptly bought and always wear a helmet. Now, God, you're easily persuaded, Karen. James is in Enfield. Hello, James.
Hello, Ian. I'm a motorcyclist, a car driver, and a bicycle cyclist.
No need to show off, James.
And I'm 50 years old, been riding bicycles on the road since I was about 8 years old. I've never had an accident with a car, but I have to say I am very, very disgusted with the behaviour of your rush hour type cyclist that ignores lights, drives, in my opinion, like an idiot. I think they need to be taught to ride like a motorcyclist, where when you learn to ride a motorbike, you're actually taught to drive to the mistakes of the car. And the reasons for that is in a car, you don't have the same view as what you have on a motorbike or a bicycle. I think cyclists really need to sort themselves out. Wearing crash helmets, I personally think it should be optional. But if we're going to make it compulsory, where do we stop? Do we make pedestrians wear crash helmets in case a car hits them?
Well, that's a very good point, which I thought of 5 minutes ago, and then it immediately went out of my mind. What do you say to the argument that car drivers drive more safely when they see someone without a helmet, because instinctively their brain tells them that that person is more vulnerable than someone with a helmet?
Well, they're vulnerable anyway, so I think if you see a cyclist, you take care anyway. I can't imagine anyone in their right mind waking up in the morning saying, do you know what, I'm not going to care about cyclists that wear helmets today. It's just not going to happen, is it?
James, thank you very much. We will take more of your calls in a second. We're also going to be talking about a political crisis, not in this country, not in Germany, but in the Republic of Ireland, where the Deputy Prime Minister is facing calls for her to resign, and there could be a general election in the offing. We'll find out why in just a moment. You're listening to LBC. I'm Ian Dale. It's 4:46.
Ian Dale at Drive on LBC.
10:25. We'll be talking about a possible snap election in the Republic of Ireland in just a moment. But before we do that, Theresa May has been in Brussels today at a summit. She's been speaking to journalists in the last few minutes.
We've had a very good summit of the Eastern Partnership, but I've taken the opportunity to have meetings with the President of the European Council and a number of other European leaders about our negotiations and the run-up to the December European Council. And there are still issues across the various matters that we're negotiating on to be resolved, but there's been a very positive atmosphere in the talks and a genuine feeling that we want to move forward together.
What evidence were you able to produce of progress? Were you able to specify a number for the Brexit divorce bill? And what do you say to the Irish government about the Irish border?
Well, we have been making progress and been making progress throughout these negotiations across all of the issues that we're still addressing. In relation to the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, we and the Irish government continue to talk about the solutions for that we have the same desire. We want to ensure that movement of people and trade across that border can carry on as now, and that we don't create any new barriers to trade or the movement of people across that border. That's the outcome that we're both agreed on, and that's what we believe is in the best interests of Northern Ireland.
And the Brexit bill, the size of the Brexit bill, did you actually able to share the new consensus around the cabinet table? Could it be 40 billion euros you're offering?
No, we've been talking about how we can progress the issue in relation to the financial settlement. I've set out the position. I did so in the Florence speech. I said that we would honour our commitments. I said that no country, no member state of the European Union need worry that they would receive less or have to pay in more in the current budget plan, and that we would honour our commitments. And that's what we've been talking about.
You still can't put a number on it?
Well, we didn't learn much from that, did we? So I'm sure there'll be lots of people poring over that in the papers tomorrow. Right, let's talk about the Republic of Ireland, because there's a political crisis developing there. Gavin O'Reilly is a political correspondent for TV3 Ireland and will tell us a lot more about it. Gavin, very good afternoon. Essentially, it revolves around the Deputy Prime Minister being involved in a scandal. Just take us through what's happened.
Yeah, I'll try to do it as briefly as possible, Ian, but it's difficult because it does go back some distance. But basically, there's been a famous police whistleblower in Ireland for the last few years by the name of Maurice McCabe, and he's lifted the lid on a whole number of scandals about botched prosecutions in his own particular part of the country, and also about penalty points being wiped off the driving licences of particular luminaries and celebrities in Ireland. But he's grown to public prominence in the last few years for all the various scandals that he's tried to shine a light on. But it is fair to say that he's been quite marginalised within the force, and particularly by senior members of the Irish police as a result. And what the latest scandal revolves around is, it's now come to light this week that back in 2015, a legal letter was sent to the Minister for Justice at the time, who is now the Deputy Prime Minister, advising her of a campaign being engineered by the most senior members of the Irish police force, which involved digging up an old allegation of sexual misconduct against the whistleblower Maurice McCabe, an allegation which had already been completely disproven, debunked and dropped by prosecutors. And they were now digging up this allegation again and hoping to use it against the Garda whistleblower Maurice McCabe. And this has resulted in a whole question mark about how exactly the Irish government has approached police whistleblowers. It's been the stated public policy for the last few years that they're always very supportive of anyone who tries to shine a light on wrongdoing within the force. But it would seem that the Minister for Justice stood idly by when she was informed that a very, very grave smear campaign was being perceived against the whistleblower. And now the whole future of the government rests on the response of the government now this evening.
Well, Leo Varadkar, the Prime Minister, the Taoiseach, is standing by his deputy, but how long do you think that is tenable? Because as I understand it, she is being prevailed upon to resign in the best interests of the government, because it's difficult to see how it can survive if she doesn't.
Yeah, well, certainly what's happened here, just to give your listeners a bit of background, is that the main Irish government party, Fine Gael, is only in power because of a confidence and supply agreement that it's reached with the main opposition party in Ireland, Fianna Fáil. And what's happened in the last few days is that Fianna Fáil says it no longer has confidence in the government because the Deputy Prime Minister, Francis Fitzgerald, continues to serve in it. And it would seem that the only way out of this particular row, given that there is now a motion of no confidence down for the Irish Parliament next week, would be for the Deputy Prime Minister to resign. The difficulty is that for Leo Varadkar it would be a huge scalp to lose, and really there isn't much appetite within the party to allow Francis Fitzgerald, the Deputy Prime Minister, to jump overboard. There is a kind of a nearly unanimous feeling, in fact a totally unanimous feeling within her political party, that she has done absolutely nothing wrong, and that in fact when she was informed of the legal campaign being waged against this police whistleblower, she was also informed in exactly the same email that there was nothing she could do, that it would be legally improper to intervene scene and what was happening just at the moment. So everyone is defending her position, and it means now that the Prime Minister will be taking a real slap in the face if he were to agree to jettison his Deputy Prime Minister when he fully agrees that she's done nothing wrong.
Well, the confidence motion, I think, is being voted on Tuesday. Maybe we'll talk again then. Gavin, thank you very much. That's Gavin O'Reilly, political correspondent for TV3 Ireland. Just a bit of breaking news for you. British Transport Police say that officers are responding to reports of an incident at Oxford Circus Underground station in central London. Officers are on the scene. We'll bring you more information when we get it here on LBC. Well, in the meantime, back to your calls on whether we should have mandatory cycling helmets. Daniel's in Hendon. Hi, Daniel.
Yeah, hi Ian. Thanks for having me on.
Not at all.
I'm absolutely shocked and disgusted by the attitude of the leaders of the cycling campaign. I'd go as far as saying they're willing to sacrifice fellow cyclists in order to push their cycling campaign. It's not about safety. All they are worried about is that there might be a fall in the number of cyclists that are riding. That's what's happening.
Well, I think we should all be worried about that, shouldn't we? Because we want to encourage cycling. It's a healthy activity.
I'm not disagreeing with that. We should absolutely encourage cycling, but it's the way they're going about it. What is there not correct about wearing a helmet? It's there to save your life. You know, there's nothing more to be said about it. You know, it's helped save. You know, I ski now. I wear a helmet. You know, you wouldn't think about not wearing a helmet these days, and they're travelling.
I used to go skiing. I never wore a helmet.
Well, not beforehand, but if you go on the slopes now, you'll see how many people. It's 3/4 of the people wear helmets these days. But this is all about safety. That's what it boils down to at the end of the day. And there's nothing, and people should have to wear.
How far do you go on this? Because in theory, you could, to take the argument to its extreme, as somebody I think mentioned this earlier, you could argue that pedestrians ought to wear helmets in case they fall over, in case a car runs into them and they hit the deck and all the rest of it. Where do you draw the line?
Well, the line is drawn that cyclings are on a movement that can travel up to 30, 40 miles an hour. So, you know, that's the reason why they should be wearing helmets. I mean, pedestrians, they're walking across the road. But cyclists are going at quite a speed. So there's no situation where they should not be wearing helmets now. That's for sure.
OK, Daniel, thank you very much for that. Let's quickly go to Tony in Clapham. 30 seconds, Tony.
Hi, Ian. How are we doing?
All right, what would you like to say?
I think the helmet should be absolutely mandatory, let alone mandatory. Common sense alone should prevail. As your previous caller just said, it protects life, it protects your head. Head injuries are very, 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 very dangerous to anybody and anyone who can choose. My brother died on a bicycle in Belvedere. Had he been wearing a helmet, it would have saved him somewhat. He suffered horrendous head injuries. Common sense would definitely prevail. And there are two types of bicycle riders, as it was said by one of your callers earlier. You got the responsible ones wearing the right type of gear. They're visible. They've got the lights and they've got the helmets. Then you've got the others who simply do not give a hoot. They get on a bike, they're on their mobile phone.
Tony, we have to leave it there. Sorry, we've reached the end of the hour. Thank you very much. Now, coming up in the next hour, more than 230 people have died in a terrible terror attack in northern Egypt. Having effectively defeated Daesh in Syria and Iraq and concentrated on homegrown terror, why have we tended to ignore terror attacks that take place in other places like Egypt? Should our international aid budget be more geared towards helping countries like Egypt combat their terror problem? And if we take our eyes off things like this, it becomes a bigger problem, which in the end can come back to bite us. Let's imagine Egypt descended into the same chaos as neighbouring Sudan or Somalia.